What's up, everyone? Check out this exclusive clip of Joe Rogan on oil and whiskey in Ironclad Original.
I've listened to you a bunch, and I've heard you want to have conversations with guys you give a shit about talking to. As long as you've done that now, looking back at it, we're asking. I mean, we're not even a real podcast. It's but it's a year and a half into it. We've done 60,
Bro,
70
it's a real
guys.
podcast. You got mics, you got a desk. I'm on it. This is a real podcast.
It's real now. We just became real.
It's the stamp of approval right there.
They're all real. Bro, go back and listen to my early podcasts. There's like fucking 1,000 listeners and no one gives a shit, and we're high as fuck and no one's paying attention. Yeah, they were terrible. You go back and listen to my early podcasts.
Yeah, well, we were
terrible.
drunk as fuck. But
Yeah, we're drunk
we had
usually. Yeah,
there's some listeners.
Yeah.
So
Me too.
what we've learned, we've learned so many amazing things, but the main takeaway that we talk about all the time is that there is no expectations, because as soon as we have an expectation for a guest or where a conversation is going to go, it's exactly the opposite. We've had guys that we were super excited and we knew we were going to be able to dig into so much stuff or whatever, and sometimes they fell a little flat, and it's nothing about that guy. It just doesn't he doesn't conversate well, or he's a little nervous, or he's something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's guys that you don't think are going to do well that come in and just fucking crush.
Yeah.
Have you learned a pattern? Can you know what one's going to be like kind of beforehand based on the guy, or is it just a surprise every time?
You never know. I mean, the hard one is writers, because some writers, they talk like they write. So it's like labor, because a lot of times when people write, they think about a word, they write, they think more, they write, they think, they write. So when those guys talk, sometimes they talk and they think and they talk and they and they talk, and they're not good at it. They're just not good at that, but they're interesting. So it's like the struggle is trying to pull the interesting information out of them and put it in a presentable form. And sometimes that's hard. And then some people shock you. And, sometimes you'll have an artist on and they're the most interesting person you've ever talked to, and they could talk forever about anything. It's really different with different people. But, what's fascinating to me is how so many different people think so differently about all kinds of aspects of life. And that's the thing that's been the most shocking about the podcast is what I talked about earlier. You get an unexpected education. I didn't plan on talking to hundreds of scientists and hundreds of professors and all these different fascinating people and get so many different views of how they view the world and how they see things and what they've experienced and what they've learned and what they know. And you add that to your life, and it's an amazing opportunity to just educate yourself.
Yeah, it truly is, man. I mean, I listen to your podcast pretty regularly, and it's actually educational. You learn some shit. When I was making fun of my wife because she sits around and reads these crazy novels, and I'm like, you are just reading nonsense, complete fucking nonsense,
Made up stories.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with made up stories.
Well,
but
yeah, but if I'm listening to something or I'm spending time doing it, I want to be educated. I want to be learning something.
right.
And
I think you do a phenomenal job of asking all the questions that somehow most of the audience wants to hear, and not being self-conscious to not know and be okay, asking to pull that information from the expert. That you hear a lot of podcasts, they want to be the expert and they want to show off to the guest
Oh yeah.
on what they know more than
Yeah,
they
that's
do.
a trap.
Right.
That's a trap. Yeah, you gotta get out of your own way. It's very important, and you gotta be real present in the moment. You almost kind of have to be, in a sense, you gotta be in some way selfless. You don't think about yourself at all. But I do think about questions, and the questions, they're organic, right? When someone says something and there's a puzzle I have in my head, what does that mean? Why'd you do it that way? Why did they start that? Why did they do this? And it's got to be organic. And a lot of that just comes from, I've done 2,000 plus podcasts, a lot of fucking podcasts. There's so many of them that along the way, you just learn how to do it better. I never thought of podcasting or conversations like an art form before I did it. But then once I did it and started seeing people that suck at it, some people that just talk over their guests, they don't listen, they're just waiting for their chance to talk. It's you're making a shitty product. Yeah. And it really is it's an audio visual form of art of the conversation. Like there's an art to having a conversation, and it's so painful when you hang out with people and they're not good at it, and they're clunky and they talk over everybody and they don't listen. It's just not fun. But then when you talk to someone who's engaging and really, really there, and you're really experiencing how their mind works, and they're experiencing how your mind works, it's very fun.
In today's day and age, with fucking TikTok and the instant gratification and the new generation, why the fuck do you think anybody sits down and listens to a conversation with two people, sometimes on a topic that they have no interest in, but they're going to listen to the whole fucking 3 hours?
It's probably more unusual.
Interesting. Well, I think more people than we would like to admit have an appetite for interesting things. The short attention span stuff like TikTok, it grabs you, but it doesn't nourish you. Like it just gives you this thing, and you can just get sucked into it and just keep scrolling and keep mindlessly absorbing very fast, short attention span shit. But there's a lot of people in the beginning of the podcast when I first started doing, they were like, you should edit your podcast. They're too long. And I'm like, well, they won't listen. If it's too long, don't listen. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And the way I want to do it is I want to have long conversations with people. Because I feel like when you talk to someone for 3 hours, which is generally the time of my podcast, the length of them, in 3 hours, you really get to know how a person thinks. You really get into the weeds about subjects, especially like complex subjects. Like, you'll see someone on a news show talk about, like, for instance, there's this guy who was, he owns White Oak Pastures, and he came on my podcast. I had seen him on Fox News, and he did this thing, and he talks very slowly and very deliberately. And like, you
awesome.
can't have a guy like that. He's awesome. But you can't have a guy like that talk for fucking 4 minutes. Like in 4 minutes, like the host was trying to urge him to talk faster. And I saw him. I'm like, I need to talk to that guy. His name's Will Harris. He's amazing. And I contacted him. I'm like, come on my show, man. I'll give you all the time you need. And so he and I had an amazing conversation about regenerative agriculture and the way he does his farm with no pesticides or herbicides, and just having everything organically interact with each other the way it would in nature. Fascinating conversation. But you need hours. You need to let that guy express himself for, it might be 10, 15 minutes before I get to talk again. Like I'm asking him a question, and he's expanding upon these very complex systems of this agriculture and natural biological systems of his farm and how he cultivated them. And it took him like 20 years to turn his farm from an industrial farm to a regenerative farm. It was an amazing conversation, but that's where a 3-hour podcast shines. And I think the other thing about podcasts is people enjoy them while they're doing other stuff.
Sure. Like
you'll enjoy it while you're at work. Like maybe you have like something you do where you could listen to music or listen to stuff while you're at work. But podcasts, like you get an education while you're doing other stuff, or maybe you have a commute. To me, I listen to a lot of stuff. I listen to like audiobooks a lot when I'm in the sauna, because I'm just sitting there for 20 minutes cooking. So I'm like, why don't I just listen to a book? And so like every day I get 20 minutes of audiobook in the sauna.
Yeah, it's wild to me in this that they consume media this way. And like you said, long format conversations with everything else in life tells you that this would not be something that people would be interested in.
It's almost probably because it's so rare in today's day and age, especially with younger people, that to sit down and actually have a conversation or to be a part of a conversation.
They'd rather listen to people have a conversation than actually go and have one.
Exactly.
Well, I'm hoping that people are having those conversations now. And I think young people who get into the show probably do have those conversations with their friends now, because they recognize that like there is a way to talk to people that's more enjoyable for everybody. And if you see people having conversations that are very interesting and they're exchanging ideas, and there's no ego problems, and there's just like this like cool way of figuring out each other and getting to know each other and getting to know each other's lives. And I think that's kind of contagious, like a lot of things. If it's interesting to you to listen to, you probably start to apply some of those the aspects of podcasting and and good conversation to your life.
Yeah, it's beneficial for sure.
In the, I know I've listened to you before talk about it. You know, you had no idea it was going to be what it is now. What point did you realize, holy fucking shit, this thing's crazy? The podcast specifically.
I don't know, man. I mean, it's like I said, it's somewhere around 2012 or 2013, it started really getting nuts. And the whole time I did the podcast, I never paid attention to the numbers. Like, I still don't look at them. I never look at the numbers. I never look at the downloads. I just do it. I just keep doing it. Once I've done, I never listen to it. I just get the fuck away. And somewhere along the line, I was in Chicago, and I was doing the Chicago theater. And I remember I had this bit where I was talking about something that happened on the podcast. And so I had to explain it. And I said, how many folks listen to the podcast? And there's 3,700 people in that place. And they just went, yeah. And I remember going, oh, shit. Like, that moment. Like, I expected a few people to, like, yeah, listen. But I didn't know how many people listened. It was nuts. And I remember being on stage going, oh, no. Like, what the fuck is going on?
What did I say? What did I say?
Well, at that moment, I realized, like, wow, this is crazy. Like, all 3,700 people in this building listen to this podcast. And it just kept getting bigger. Now it's number one in 96 countries. It's crazy. And it's been number one for fucking years. It's like, yeah. I keep telling Jamie, my producer, I'm like, when is somebody going to beat us? Like, when are they going to figure this out?
I don't
like,
think
I'm not doing anything that different. Like, all I'm doing is talking to people. I'm just having a conversation. It's like, it's weird. And I'm not trying to pick guests. I'm like, this one's going to get a lot of downloads. I just pick whoever I think is interesting. I've had people on that, like, no one knows who they are. They're just like, you know, just regular folks that I think are interesting. Like, I had this lady on who was a beekeeper, you know, or I had Jason Everman on Monday, who was a guy he played in the early days of Nirvana, and he played in Soundgarden, and then he went on to join the military. He left being a rock star and became a ranger and did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple tours in Afghanistan. One of the most fucking, and then graduated from Columbia after he got out of the military with a degree in philosophy. He's got a master's. And he's a fucking brilliant guy. Yeah. But nobody knows who the fuck he is. He's just interesting. And so I'm picking these people just only based on whether or not I want to talk to them. So I'm kind of stunned by it all still to this day, but I enjoy doing it. So I just keep doing it and, just keep on trucking.